This series is, I want to make this series of videos to help you guys better understand Vietnam, the realities of Vietnam, and what it's like through the eyes of a Westerner who is actually from Vietnam. Okay, so in this video, guys, many of you guys know I left America. You know, I came to America as a Vietnamese refugee, lived there for 40 years. I grew up in the ghettos of Southeast Texas, you know, hung around the wrong people, ended up selling drugs, going to prison for nearly 14 years, came out in my mid-30s, started learning how to trade stocks, futures, forex, cryptocurrencies, did really well, you know, and I was able to retire in my mid-40s. I relocated back to Vietnam in, you know, my mid-40s after I retired, right, so I can take care of my sick mom, my biological mom, who's still in Vietnam. The other thing too is that when I came back here, guys, I want to share with you guys my first impression of Vietnam, okay? Because I left here when I was around 6, 7 years old in 1977, 78. I haven't been back since, and I first came back in the end of 2018, and people always ask me, what was the biggest shocker? What was the biggest difference that you saw when you got back to Vietnam versus being in America for 40 years, okay? And I'm going to share with you guys my first impression and the number one thing that shocked me the most in Vietnam that I never, ever, ever expected. I never, ever expected. I would never have expected this, okay? Maybe you guys already knew it because you guys been to Vietnam, but since it was my first time, I did not know, okay? My impression of Vietnam, my first impression of Vietnam is that it has significantly more freedom than America. Let me say that again, okay? Vietnam has significantly more freedom, all right, more personal freedom than in America. And I know that that is going to shock everyone, okay? Because I grew up in the U.S. and for 40 years, the U.S. government told me that Vietnam is a communist country, people are oppressed, there's no freedom, okay? The Vietnamese community, the older generation of Vietnamese refugees, the same group of people that came over to America at the same time I did, they have nothing good to say about Vietnam. They have everything bad to say about the government in Vietnam. And they talk about how, you know, there's no freedom of speech and all this other stuff. And it comes up back to freedom of speech. That's like the number one thing when you ask people in Vietnam why America is better and why everybody in Vietnam wants to come to America, right? And why all the Vietnamese, most of the Vietnamese in America say that, you know, the Vietnamese government and the country is not good, is because this thing with freedom, okay? So, in this video, I want to talk about and discuss the freedom between in America versus the freedom that's in Vietnam, okay? In my opinion, when I hear people talk about freedom in America or Vietnam, in a communist country versus a democratic country, there's actually two types of freedom, okay? But people only talk about one type of freedom, okay? So the first type of freedom is the obvious one, which is the freedom of speech, which means that you can say whatever you want to say, okay? So let's look at freedom of speech in Vietnam and freedom of speech in America, okay? Freedom of speech in Vietnam is that you can say whatever you want in Vietnam. You actually can. You can say whatever you want. Nobody gives a crap about it, okay? There's only one rule, one caveat, okay? You just don't say anything about the government and what they're doing. It's a one-party communist system. Just don't talk about them. You can talk about your buddies, you can talk about your family, you can talk about your friends, you can talk about your schools, you can talk about your business, you can talk about anything you want. Just don't criticize what the government is doing, okay? That's the only thing. That's the only caveat. Other than that, you can say whatever you want, okay? I have not seen anybody been restricted in what they can say. They just are not allowed to say, right, stuff negative about the government. But the funny thing is about this, guys, the funny thing is about this is that everybody in Vietnam, when you talk to them, they say negative things about the government in front of you. But in front of the government official, they will never say that. Like they'll say, hey, you know, like, hey, this guy's stupid, the government's stupid, there's an idiot, whatever. They'll say all that stuff to you, but the minute that government official walks in, They don't say anything. Hey, what's up, bro? Hey, what's up, man? How's things going? How's your family doing? And the funny thing is that most of these government officials are their next door neighbors. So you guys got to understand something. Most of these government officials, outside of like the big cities like Ho Chi Minh City, like Da Nang or Hanoi or places like that where it's a massive metropolitan area, right? Most of the locals, right, the local government, right, in the small cities, the government officials are actually your neighbors. Like everyone knows who they are. So it's weird because people will talk bad about the communist government as if it's a separate entity, but then it's actually their neighbor who's actually the government official, and they go and they drink and they party together and they hang out together as if they're best friends. And it's like the weirdest thing, because here you see people talking bad about the Vietnamese government, but then they go hang out with them off work. Like when they're off work, they're out of their government uniforms, they go hang out, eat together, restaurants, they go to the kids' birthday parties together, and they go to the funerals together, and they're actually family and relatives of each other. They grew up together in school, in high school, and college and everything. So it's like the weirdest thing. Like, you know, and it's funny because the government officials I've seen that come out of their uniforms and when they're off work, you'll even hear them say bad things about, they'll even criticize the communist government, but they are the communist government. So it's like the weirdest thing. I don't know how to explain it, you know, but I can tell you this, is that you can pretty much say anything you want. It's just that everybody avoids saying anything about the government to the government in their face, okay? Now let's talk about America. In America, you also have freedom of speech, okay? You see the journalists and the idiots that's up there criticizing Trump, telling he's stupid to his face, telling him he's an idiot, and all that stuff, okay? So there is freedom of speech there to talk about the government, okay, in America, okay? Now, let's talk about something else here, okay? Something else that you guys may not be aware of, okay? Let's talk about what happens when you start making more money, or you become an influencer where a lot of people are following you, like on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Let's talk about the reality of freedom of speech in America versus Vietnam, okay? So, in America, in my opinion, when you're poor, you're broke, and you're nobody, and nobody knows who the hell you are, you have no followers and no subscribers, yes, you do have freedom of speech. However, the minute you have followers following you, thousands of people following you on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram, on social media and stuff, and the minute you start making some money, you no longer have the freedom of speech like everybody says, right? And I'll give you proof. Look at the people who are conservatives in America who favor Donald Trump. You have people from YouTube, right? The owners of YouTube, the owners of Google, the owners of Twitter, the owners of Facebook are all censoring the people who try to say good things about Donald Trump. Why is that? Is that freedom of speech? And they do it, and everybody knows they do it. Like if you're if you're in America and you don't know that they're doing it, you're just ignorant, you're not paying attention, or you're not accepting reality, okay? If you're outside of America, you may not be aware that this is happening inside of America, that the minute you have money and the minute you have influence, right, in America, there are parties out there that will censor you and prevent you from saying the right things, okay? This happens all the time on social media, okay? Recently, I have been saying good stuff about Donald Trump, okay? And I believe that the reason why our business bank account got shut down was because I was saying good stuff about Donald Trump. You know, the bank came back and said, oh man, you're doing this with cryptocurrencies, and now, you know, we can tolerate that risk, you know, but now, you know, you're hiring employees and, you know, engineers in Vietnam, and you're wiring money to Vietnam and doing all that stuff. Hey, that's just way too much risk. It's kind of funny that that came out of nowhere, right? Whereas before, when I did not talk about Donald Trump on my Twitter and on my YouTube channel and things like that, nothing happened. But the minute I start wearing a MAGA, Make America Great cap again, start tweeting about how great Donald Trump is and how he's doing good for America, all of a sudden, you know, our business bank account gets shut down by Chase Bank. You know, Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe I got too many conspiracy theories. Maybe it's because I used to live in Austin, next to Alex Jones, right? In the same city that Alex Jones is in. I don't know, okay? But it's just a coincidence to me. And the excuse that the bank used was that, oh, you know what? That's just too much risk. We can handle you doing cryptocurrency as a business. We can't handle you operating with Vietnam because that's a country that's on the OFAC list and they're not a U.S. ally. So, there's just too much risk. We're going to have to shut down your bank account. Here's your money, go somewhere else. All right? So the minute you start making some money and you have social media influence is when you start getting censored. Okay? Now, that is just my opinion. I don't have any, solid evidence to link, them shutting down my bank account and telling me to go somewhere else, and that, maybe that is a legitimate excuse that Vietnam is on the American OFAC list. That's OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Controls or something like that. And they are the ones responsible for saying that, hey, you know what, American companies can do business with this country, American companies can do business with this country, but not with this country or with this country. And so Vietnam is on one of the countries that's listed as like a red flag, like, hey, this is not a favorable nation, So, it's not easy to do business with Vietnam. So we're hiring software engineers to build our portfolio management software, our trading software, and our Taifu indexes. So because of that, we had to pay them. So they're giving us a hard time about that. Now, let me tell you guys something, okay? There's a difference between freedom of speech versus freedom of action, okay? In America, we talk about freedom, but there's actually not as much freedom, personal freedom, as it is in Vietnam. And I'll give you guys several examples, okay? In America, I live in a pretty decent neighborhood in North Dallas, okay? So in the city of Dallas, in the northern part of the city, is where the wealthy neighborhoods are at. And if you live there in a wealthy neighborhood, and let's say that I want to go over there and paint my house purple or pink, they're not going to let you do that. They're not going to let you do that. Like, you have to get permission from all the other owners in your neighborhood. Like in my homeowners association, my neighborhood in America, right? There's 400 and something homes in that neighborhood. In order for me to paint my house pink or purple, I would have to go and get permission from the majority of them to do that. Just think about that for a moment, guys. That's not freedom. I wanted to buy an RV, right? When Leon and I went and shopped for a Ferrari and a Lamborghini, we decided, hey man, we got kids now. We got kids coming up. He had an upcoming daughter. I had an upcoming son that was going to be born. And there was no way that we were going to drive the Ferrari or the Lamborghini or the McLaren, We weren't, right? So we decided, hey man, let's not get it, and Leon ended up getting an RV, and I wanted to get an RV too, because I already had 2 kids, and I'm like, it's a pain in the butt. Every time I go to the beach, every time I go to the national parks, right? I can only stay there for 2 hours, and I gotta run back to the hotel and put my kids in there. And now that I'm retired, I want to be able to enjoy my life. So I wanted to go to, Leon and I both wanted to go to the national parks, to the beaches and all that stuff, and be able to stay there, right? For at least the whole day. And even better, we can stay there for 2, 3, 4, 5 days at a time before we have to go back to the hotel. And so both he and I decided we were going to get an RV. So Leon lives in a place where he can park an RV easily, okay? Because the RVs are much taller. So I live in a neighborhood where you can't even park a tall truck there, like a full-size, a big truck. They won't let you park it in there in front of your house because they say it makes the neighborhood look ugly and it lowers the value of the neighborhood. I'm like, you know what? Screw you guys. This is my house. But they go, no, you can't. Okay? So anyways, I go get permission, and I had to spend months getting permission to get the authority and the permission from all the other homeowners so that I can park an RV, okay, that is slightly taller than a regular size van. Like, I already have a Toyota minivan, and the RV van was going to be like, I don't know, maybe 1 arm's length, like from here to the tip of my fingers, that length higher, right? So I had to get permission to do that. It took a couple months, okay? So because of that, I'm like, man, this ain't freedom. Now check this out. When I own my house, right, I have to pay, like, for every $100,000 in North Dallas, I have to pay about almost 3%, in property taxes each year. So for every $100,000 in your house value, you have to pay $3,000. So if you live in a $500,000 house, that's $500,000 times 3%, that's about $15,000. So divide the $15,000 by 12 months, you are paying over $1,000, right? Somewhere around $1,100 every month for the rest of your life, no matter what happens. And in the North Dallas area, it was a booming, growing neighborhood. Like the houses are going up in value. So every year, your property taxes go up. Like right now, I already know that my property taxes are gonna go up next year for my Dallas house, okay? So because of that, to me, that's not freedom. To me, like I can pay off the bank for the house and have I owe no money to the bank for the house, and every month I still gotta pay $1,100, right, or property taxes to the U.S. government for living in that house. So there's never ever a time where I'm actually free and clear of the house, right? That's why you guys hear me say that you cannot own personal property in America, because the minute you stop paying your property taxes, you will find out real quick who has control of that property. Now, let's go to Vietnam, right? You live in a $500,000 house in Vietnam, right? And by the way, there are lots of $500,000 houses in Vietnam. Don't think that Vietnam is a broke country or a poor country, okay? There are lots and lots of $500,000 homes in Vietnam, especially in Ho Chi Minh City. There are lots of them. In Da Nang, lots of them, okay? Probably more so than you can ever imagine, okay? But anyways, if you own a $500,000 home, the minute you finish paying it off, right, there is absolutely no property taxes. Matter of fact, even when you are borrowing money from the bank to buy that house and to pay off that house, there is no property taxes. And when you, it's very common for families in Vietnam for the grandfather to own that $500,000 property, and then by the time he passes it down to his son, now the property is worth $700,000, and then when the son passes it on to the grandson, now the house is worth $800,000-$900,000, okay? And there's no property tax, no estate taxes, no property tax, no nothing. So that means that if one generation pays for that house, all the generations after it never have to pay a house payment again. That's the reason why we have lots of young people in Vietnam that grow up with very little debt. Like most people in Vietnam that are college graduates, they usually have 1 or 2 years worth of living expenses saved up. That means that if they stop working for a year or two, it's not a big deal. They can stop working for a year or two and still have money to live on, because they rarely have a huge housing cost, because their house was already paid for by their grandfather or by their father already. So now they acquired the house tax-free. In America, you don't have that situation. Most of the people that I know of in America, if they own a house and their parents, and they pass it on to their kids usually cannot afford the property taxes on it, and it forces them to have to sell the house. And then they split the money from the house among their brothers and sisters. So it's rare that you ever have a family live in the same house for more than one generation in America. It's very rare. I don't know, my personal friends, I don't know of anybody that lives in the same house that their parents grew up in and that they were born in, that they lived in. Or I've never even heard of anyone live in the same house that their grandfather lived in. Okay, why? Because the house goes up in value, the property taxes go up in value, and you got to pay more. And if you make a good income to where you can pay the property taxes on your house, but then when you die and you give that house to your kids, and if they don't have a good income to pay property tax on it, they can't afford to live there. They cannot afford to live there, so it forces them to have to sell the house. So to me, that's not freedom. To me, that's not freedom when you spend all your life building up the assets, right, that you have, and then you pass those assets on to your kids and they cannot keep it due to property taxes, okay? So for me, there's more freedom in Vietnam, in property freedom, okay? Because I don't have to owe nobody after I pay that property off, and I don't owe nobody. Now, some people say that, there's a lot of Vietnamese broadcasters in America that say, oh, the communist government will come in, they'll seize your property and they'll take your property and they pay, very little on it, Now, and they're stealing it from the residents, right, and the citizens. Okay, I want you guys to understand something, okay? I ask my family members, and I ask other Vietnamese people if that is true, okay? Because they say, oh, in America, the government doesn't, come and just rip your property off from you or steal your property from you. And I'm like, they can take the property whenever they want. It's called eminent domain. Like, if they need to build a highway or a railroad system or a public transport system through your property, and if they need that bad enough, they can take it. They'll offer you whatever the market value is for your property, but they can take that property anytime they want. So the idea that it only happens in communist Vietnam and not in democratic America, that is not true. I've lived in both. I lived in America before. I know that if the government needs that property, they can get it from you. The only thing they have to do is just pay you whatever the market value is for that property. Now, what about in Vietnam? Now, in Vietnam, real estate is completely different in Vietnam. Like, I have to make a separate video for you guys about real estate in Vietnam. It's not what you imagine. It's crazy. Like, they don't know about stocks, they don't know about bonds, they don't know about abstract investment products. So the only thing they know what to invest in is either gold or real estate. That's the only thing they know how to invest in is land and gold. That's it. So because of that, everybody is trying to buy land. And because of that, it's possible in America, if your land or your property goes up in value by 5 or 6% in a year, you are happy and you are thrilled to death. Like, that is fabulous, okay? In Vietnam, that's nothing. Like, nobody even pays attention to it when your property goes up 6 or 10%. In Vietnam, your property can go up 100%, 200%, 500% in a year. There are places where you can buy property and turn around and immediately sell it within an hour later after you just bought it and get 120, 30, 40, 50, 80% on it. That is normal. There are places that are so hot, the minute they open up that land for sale, the government is making it, a big developer comes in, buys all that land, and the minute that big developer, that whale investor, makes it public and he's selling pieces of that land to everyone, people can come in there and they'll actually buy and resell it that same day and make 40, 50, 100% in the same day or the same week. Okay, so that's very common in Vietnam. So because of that, real estate is different in Vietnam. So they can take that land from you and that property from you and give you the current market value for that. Let's say that they give it to you at X amount. I'm just going to make up a number, okay? Let's say they give it to you, they pay you $10 a square meter for that land, okay? Now they're going to build the SkyTrain through that land, okay? But it takes them 5 or 6 or 7 years or 10 years to build that SkyTrain. And let's just say that 5 years later, that land that they bought from you is $10 a square meter. Now it's $100 a square meter. So you'll hear a lot of people go and complain that, hey, the government ripped me off. This land is worth $100 a square meter, and all they gave me was $10 a square meter. You'll hear that in the news and in the media, but when I go and ask the local people, like, is that true? Does that really happen? And the locals are telling me, like the people that buy land there, they're telling me, no. When the government takes that land from you, they're giving it to you at market price. And they haven't built the SkyTrain or the railroad system or the hospital or the schools in that neighborhood yet. So when they buy it from you, yeah, they're giving you market value for it at the time they bought it. But if 5 years later, after they build the SkyTrain system and it goes up in value, they're not going to give you the $100 a square meter for it when it was only worth $10 a square meter 5 years ago. So I want you guys to be aware of that. Now, there are places where in like District 2 in Ho Chi Minh City where the people are claiming that the government came in there and they sold that land to big whale investors for very dirt cheap, and they didn't compensate the local farmers and the residents. There's news about that. I have not done enough research to say that, but I have done enough research to know that by talking to the local people that live in that neighborhood, they're saying, oh, hey, that guy, he's asking too much. That's not how much the land is worth, and you can't expect the government to give you $100 a square meter when they haven't built the SkyTrain through it yet. The value isn't worth that much yet. So people want the government to compensate them for what that land is going to be worth after they build the hospital, after they build the schools, after they build the shopping centers in that neighborhood. And the reality is, other local people are saying, hey, no government is going to give you that. They're going to give it to you what it's worth today. Okay, so I'm sharing this with you about personal freedom, about property freedom, about you can do whatever you want with your property, okay? The reason why I'm sharing this with you is that one thing that I've noticed in Vietnam is that you cannot say what you want to say about the government, but you can actually just go do whatever you want with your property and your personal business. Like if you want to hire employees and you don't give a shit if they wear steel-toe boots while they're doing construction, right? Or you want to hire women or kids or anything to do whatever you want, that's up to you. Like that's your business. You do whatever you want with it, okay? The government tries to interfere the least as possible for you to do it because they want the country to grow. Because they know that if they have too much government regulation and too much government interference, right, the country cannot grow, and they want the country to grow, okay? So they don't want the country to be behind. So everything that you see here in Vietnam, there's a lot more, in my opinion, personal freedom. Like, I'll give you another example. I don't know why, but Vietnamese people love karaoke. Like, they love karaoke. I don't know why, but they do. I really don't care about it, like I know that it exists in America too, but over here in Vietnam, they are really crazy about it. They will put speakers, 1 yard or 1 meter tall speaker boxes in the back of their cars, in their vans, go to places, take it out, plug it in, and they will turn it up so that it's so freaking loud that it's unimaginable. Like, how can people put up with this in the neighborhood? Like, there's absolutely no way that you can get away with doing that in any American neighborhood, right? You cannot even do that at a gun range that's noisy, okay? Like, there's no place in America, you can go to a construction site and can't even turn music up that loud, okay? And not have somebody say something about it. Over here, if it's your property and you turn on the music as loud as you want, I mean as loud as you can possibly, that money will pay for speakers to be loud in your neighborhood, nobody says anything. They can hate it all they want, but ain't nobody coming over telling you to turn your music down, okay? If you want to fix your car in front of your house, no one says anything. Like the neighborhood I live in Dallas, you cannot change the oil in your car. You cannot change the air filter in you cannot do any type of engine repair in front of your house. Okay? To me, that's pretty messed up. Like, this is my house, this is my property. I need to change the water or the oil in my car. I should have the right to do that. No, you can't. Okay? The wealthier neighborhood that you live in America, the less freedom you actually have. If you live in a poor-ass ghetto neighborhood, you can do whatever you want. But the wealthier the neighborhood that you live in, the less freedom, personal property freedom that you have. In Vietnam, there's none of that. Your house, your property, you do whatever the hell you want. And check this out. If your property line comes up to here, you can do whatever you want all the way up in that property as tall as you want, right? Now, the only thing is, if you're building something really tall, like if you want to build a 7-story house, then you got to get government permits and you got to show them, like anything over 7, I think, if I remember it correctly, anything over 5 or 7 stories tall, if you want to build your house. I'm not talking about your commercial business. I'm talking about your house. If you want to build your house more than 5 or 6 or 7 stories, right? They require that the foundation has to be a certain width. So the lots of land in in Vietnam, they're sectioned off by 5-meter wide lots. They're usually either 4 or 5 or 6 meters wide. And if you want to build a house that's more than like 7 stories, they require that you have more than 5 meters wide of foundation. So you got to buy 2 lots to build something that tall. But that's for safety, because they don't want the house to topple over and crush somebody else or fall over. So I can understand that. Like, that's for architectural, engineering, safety. I can understand that. But other than that, you can build whatever you want, like on your property, okay? So you want to raise chickens on your house? You can raise chickens. You want to put a goat in the back of your yard? You can put a goat in the back of your yard. You want 10 dogs in the back of your yard? You can have it. You want a pit bull? You want a Rottweiler in your yard? Nobody gives a shit what you do inside your property as long as it's inside your property. Okay? Now check this out. You cannot do that in America. Like in my neighborhood in America, right? You cannot own a Rottweiler. You cannot own a pit bull because somebody got scared of pit bulls and Rottweilers and they said you can't have them there. You cannot have dogs over a certain height in my neighborhood. because they feel it's dangerous, right? It's my house, my property. If I want to put the dog in my property to protect my property, as my personal business. You should not interfere with that. You can't do that in America if you're in a wealthy neighborhood, okay? In Vietnam, doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, that's your property. You do whatever you want with it, okay? Now check this out. Check this out. It's my observation that in America, you can say whatever you want, but you cannot do what you want, okay? In Vietnam, you cannot always say what you want, but you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can pretty much do whatever you want in Vietnam. To me, I like that better. I like that better, okay? I like to be able to do whatever I want. I don't say shit about the American political system anyway. When I was living there for 40 years, I never said nothing. I only recently said something about Donald Trump because I believe what he's doing is good for America, so I made a few comments about it, okay? Other than that, I don't care what the government does. If they want to go bomb Iraq, they want to go start a war somewhere, that's their business. None of my business. Okay, leave me alone. Let me do my business. Let me trade. Let me make money. Let me feed my family. That's all I care about. Don't bother me when I'm trying to make money for my family. Okay, but in Vietnam, you pretty much, if you and I want to go open up a coconut stand and sell coconuts in the middle of the streets, there are people that put coconuts on the stand and go out in the middle of the intersection at a major intersection and stand there and sell coconuts to people. You think you can get away with that in America? You cannot do that in America, right? You cannot do that. You cannot do that in America, right? There are people that work at construction sites with no hard hats, no steel-toe shoes, no safety harnesses. They're working on the 10th floor of a hotel and there's no safety harnesses or nothing. Absolutely nothing. If they fall off, they're going to die. If they trip and fall, they're going to die, okay? Nobody says anything because it's that project, that company's personal business, that's their problem, okay? No interference from the government, okay? So I want to share this with you guys about the freedom of action and the freedom of speech in America versus communist Vietnam, okay? There's a lot of myths out there, but I'm telling you, there's a lot more freedom. Like if you talk to all the Westerners here that are in Vietnam, they say the number one reason why they're doing business in Vietnam is because they have less regulation and more freedom to make money. More freedom to do the things that they need to grow their business. And that's why they're here. And a lot of them refuse to leave. Why? Because they say there's more freedom here than in America, more freedom than the European Union, more freedom than Australia, and more freedom than Canada, okay? So despite what everybody says about the communist government in America, and the negative things they say about it, and they're saying that there's no freedom of speech, they're probably true, okay? There's no freedom of speech towards the government, but as far as what you want to do, the government doesn't. I have not seen the government interfere with anybody or anyone about what they're doing, okay? I have not, okay? Maybe I'm blind, maybe I'm ignorant, maybe I'm stupid, maybe I'm new in Vietnam. Let me know. Let me know if I'm missing something, but let me know with facts and logic and reasoning. Don't just tell me I'm stupid, okay? I already know I'm stupid, okay? All right, so thanks for watching this video, guys, and I hope that this video helps to open your eyes, guys. By my first impression was that I was shocked about the freedom that's in Vietnam compared to the freedom, the lack of freedom in America, okay? So thanks for watching this video, guys. If you like it, give me 2 thumbs up. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at